It feels good to be making videos again. For those of you who don't know, I actually trashed my MacBook Pro a couple of weeks ago. I spilled a glass of water over it, rendering it completely useless and not being able to make these videos. However, 28 days later, I have my MacBook back and we can make videos and we can hang out again together. So I am super stoked to be back. Anyway guys, let's get straight into today's video. Today I'm going to show you how adding gels to your lights will take your automotive photography to the next level. Although you already know that because you've seen the title and thumbnail. Okay, roll the intro. What's going on guys, Shooting Dave here, so good to see your faces. Welcome back to the channel. Now if you're new here and you don't know what I'm about, I am a photographer from London that now lives here in Los Angeles, and I make photo and video editing tutorials, so if that is something that sounds of interest to you, then please do consider subscribing. So let me show you what this video is all about. Sound good? Okay, recently I used gels to create this set of images of the Good Smiles Racing AMG GTR race car that I shot at race service, and I love the way they came out. I'd been inspired by one of my fellow photographer friends, Tom Bateman, and I loved his set of images of the BMW E30 M3 that he shot, and I really wanted to try out the technique for myself. Now you know what you too can create. Maybe you'd afford me a little bit of time to give you a bit of backstory to this. When I saw this car on Race Service's Instagram stories, two things struck me. Number one, I had to shoot this car, and number two, it had to be colourful. I knew I had to do something different with it. Surely I had something in my kit that I could do this with. Now I had a rough plan. There were two accent colours that I really wanted to tie into with the car. You see, it had pink and blue accents and I really like that, so I thought I'd try and match that with some of my lighting. You see, I thought it'd be fun to tie in those two colours into the shoot itself to help complement the car. And well, you know, it's fun. Now, my young Neuro YN300 Mark II, which I'm actually using to light myself with right now, when I bought that, link in the description if you want to pick one up too, it actually came with some gels already, like some nice blues, oranges and this pink as well. However, it wasn't really strong enough for the look I wanted. Thankfully, I had some other gels inside my gear closet. All I needed to do was cut them down to size and then test them out. Now that I had some gels that would work, let me walk you through the shoot. See, any normal shoot like this, I would light paint the entire car and just light paint it. However, I wanted to do something completely different this time round. I wanted the colours of the gels to be the primary subject along with the car. This would mean that there would not only be the key light source, there would also be part of the subject matter itself. Now you guys know me, of course I was going to be light painting these cars. However, the light painting pass would only be a secondary or fill light, if you will. Out of the 3 shots I did, only one of them had 2 light painted exposures and the others, well, they only had 1. Now, if you guys know me, that is incredibly low even by my standards. Still with me? Great. Hit that like button as we're about to jump into Photoshop. Now, before we jump into Photoshop, I want to show you some of the frames and some of the settings I used to take this image. Now, this isn't going to be a Photoshop tutorial on light painting. I have a whole playlist for that, so if you haven't seen it already, then please check out this link up here. But what I do want to show you is how I went about combining and blending these images together to create the final image. Okay, So let's have a look inside Lightroom. So let's start off with the blue gelled image. And now, as you can see, it was shot at ISO 50 on a 35mm lens on my Canon 5D Mark III at f5.6, and the shutter speed was 10 seconds. I like to use 10 seconds. It's what I use for basically every single light painted exposure that I do. And this is basically it. The light was simply just in front of the car to the right hand side, and it was casting this lovely blue light all the way through the frame. And it was the exact same story for the pink light. I had it just behind the car and about 5 feet to the left of it. So it was shining towards the car and casting all this lovely cool reflections on the floor and this nice pink tone in the environment. Then to blend that with a light painted image, this one is the one I used, and I simply just stood at the front of the car and walked all the way down the side of it, holding the light about head height, and the exposure time for that was exactly the same as the others. So ISO 50, 35mm lens, f5.6 and 10-second exposure. I did, however, do one extra exposure, and that's for the headlights. So this was basically just turning on the lights of the car, and I just manually triggered the shutter speed, and I had a 0.6 exposure time. So basically very, very quick. And that was just enough to pull out the details in the headlight, and that's all I wanted. I wasn't going to use any of this red in the back there because I figured the gelled lights look good enough. Okay, let's have a look inside Photoshop and let's start building up this image. Okay, so this is the comp inside of Photoshop, and as you can see, we have our blue layer. Now, if we turn on the pink layer, this is how the two look together. Now, I wasn't quite happy with the way the blue and the pink was looking. I felt like there was a slight hue shift that I wanted to achieve, so I just added a slight hue adjustment to the blue and a slight one to the pink, just to make it a little bit more blue and a little bit more pink, because who doesn't love a vibrant image? Now, I also went ahead and made some adjustments to the rest of the environment just to focus your eye towards the car. So I added the curves to the inside, just brightening it up, and a curves adjustment to the outside, just darkening it down. Now, I'm not going to go into how I pathed out these adjustment layers because I've done a whole tutorial on that. So if you want to know how to use the pen tool and make precise adjustments, then check out this video up here. It'll be much beneficial to you, and it will help you make your retouching that much better. Okay, so what else will we do? Well, I took out some of these orange hues in the garage door because I didn't like the way that was looking, and I also darkened the foreground a little bit. So that's basically how the two gelled lights combine, and that's what it looks like. So let's start building up the car. Now, for this, I just had my light painted layer on here, and we had this set to normal because I was going to add the gelled lights back on top of the car. So mainly focusing on environments, but then recycling what we'd already used and using that to blend onto the car. So for this, I just made a slight adjustment, adding some contrast into the car. Then I just had the pink light down the side and the blue light around the front. And you will notice there's a little mask on the pink copy, so if we have a look at that mask, and that's basically just getting rid of some little hot spots down the car, which I didn't really like that much, and I think it looks much cleaner like that. And here you can see just how subtle the light painted layer is. It's not doing a huge amount, it's not contributing that much to the overall image. The gelled lights are still the hero. Okay, so this stage is looking pretty cool, but it's lacking that extra flair. Now, I wanted more of that synthwave vibe because this car and the colours on it really do lend itself to it. So I felt like it needed some more flair, so that's what I started doing. Started adding in some light leaks and some extra flares. And I did that by basically masking it towards the interior of the garage so it wouldn't be showing up on the outside. So if I start building up these flares, you can see how they basically get added on top of each other. There's some slight color adjustments to each of them just to dial it in so it's looking pretty cool. And now all of this is contained inside this masked group. So if we turn this group off, you can see they're actually inside the building, and I used the mask so they would only be visible on the interior that we can see through the garage. So if we turn that back off, that's how it's looking so far. Now we're cooking, but there's still more that I can do. Smoke, fog, haze, whatever you call it, I fancy adding some of that in there. So basically I got some brushes and I sampled some of the colours of the lights and basically just started brushing it in around. So if we have a look at how this is all going on, so come to our smoke group here and we'll start at the bottom. So I've basically got a very soft layer set to screen at 10% visibility, so it's barely noticeable, and I have masked it basically onto the front side of the car, and there's a little bit more here on the left, a little bit more on the right, and a little bit more overall, just so it looks like that garage has got some smoke coming out of it, just to make it a little bit more cinematic. And if you're wondering where I got these wonderful smoke brushes from, well, I got them from my good friend Alex McKenzie of 85mm on Instagram, and he made a whole video showing you how to install and use these brushes. So I'll link it up here or down below, and he's been kind enough to give away these brushes for free. And I strongly suggest you go and pick them up yourself. And the final piece to this image before we head into Lightroom and finish it off is the headlights, which I shot earlier. So if we turn this on, you can see that I've got a mask just around the headlights. So 2 blobs basically around the headlights, and this layer is set to screen, full brightness, and I have a curves adjustment layer on top, just pumping it up a little bit more. And then I actually sampled the headlights themselves and then used a soft brush just to brush around the headlights to add to the smoky, foggy, hazy, whatever you want to call it, atmosphere. And that's basically all there is into Photoshop. Now let's jump into Lightroom. And here we are inside Lightroom. This is the before and this is the end. So not a huge change, it's more of a cool and a bit more contrast. So I'm going to go through a couple of the settings as I did to this image to get this end result. So starting off at the top, we have a gradiated filter up here, which I just basically darkened down the top of the image a little bit. So 0.66 negative on the exposure, and that was just enough to draw your eye down. I cooled down the image and added a bit more magenta in there, just selling into the fact that I've got these gelled lights and I really want to make them the hero of the image. I dropped the exposure down a little bit as well because I feel like it was a little bit too bright. Pushed up the highlights, dropped the shadows, increased the brightness of the whites, and dropped down the blacks just a little bit. Added a little bit of texture and clarity and a good dose of vibrance, and also took out some of the saturation as well so it doesn't look too ugly and garish. Coming down to the curves, boosted the highlights again and then came and held the shadows as to where they are. And if we come into the blue channel, I pushed some blue into the shadows and draw some out of the highlights, which introduce a little bit more yellow. Let's have a look in the green channel, left that alone, and same with the red. So that was all we did there. And there's some minor tweaks that I made to some of the hue, saturation and luminance to some of the colors. You can see them here for the luminance, nothing for the saturation, and nothing for the hue. So basically just dialing in the colors to make them look as good as I possibly could. Didn't do any split toning, and then we come down to sharpening, quite a large amount with a decent radius and a lot of detail, but then a lot of masking in here as well. So if we hold down Alt or Option over the masking and click it, you can see the white areas are the portions of the image that have been sharpened. I did a little bit of noise reduction, not that it really needs it at this base ISO of ISO 50, so that's pretty low. And that's basically all I did to the image, and that's the final result. Without gels, this image really would not have the same amount of punch, and I want to thank Tom Bateman for the amazing inspiration in the idea for doing this image. You should all go and check out his work, Tom Bateman on Instagram. I'll leave a link down in the description for his work. You should definitely check it out. But I love the way this turned out. I'm so stoked on the end result, and I genuinely cannot wait to go out and try experimenting some more with gels and seeing what kind of cool concepts we can come up with. So that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and follow me on Instagram. I am @ShootingDave, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.